In March of 2014, an 8-year-old girl named Relisha Rudd was living with her family inside the DC General Shelter in Southeast Washington. It was a converted hospital, bed bugs in the mattresses, no playground for the kids, dirty showers. Hundreds of families were packed into a building that was never meant to house them. A janitor at the shelter named Khalil Tatum started spending time with Relisha. Her family allowed it, sometimes for days at a time, sometimes for weeks. Nobody at the shelter flagged it. Nobody at her elementary school flagged it either, at least not right away. Relisha stopped showing up to class, and it took weeks before a school counselor finally called the shelter to ask where she was. When they called, Tatum answered the phone. He pretended to be a doctor. On March 1st, security cameras at a DC hotel captured the last known footage of Relisha Rudd alive. She was walking through the hallway with Tatum. She was not officially reported missing until March 19th. That is 18 days when an 8-year-old girl was gone and the system did not notice. Police later found Tatum's wife murdered in a motel room in Oxon Hill, Maryland. She had been shot. On April 1st, they found Tatum himself dead in Kenilworth Park from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Investigators believe he killed Relisha before taking his own life. The day after Relisha was last seen, Tatum purchased contractor-weight trash bags and spent hours in that same park. Police and FBI search teams combed the area with cadaver dogs and dive teams. They searched again in 2016, sending 60 officers and federal agents through a construction site for hours. They searched again in 2018 along the Anacostia River. Volunteers found bones in the park at one point. They were not human. Relisha's body has never been recovered. No charges have ever been filed. As of March 2026, the Metropolitan Police Department renewed its public call for information and said her case remains open. She would be 20 years old now. Her community marks July 11th as Relisha Rudd Remembrance Day every year. Age-progressed photos show what she might look like as a young woman, but nobody has seen her since that hotel hallway in 2014. This is a story about the people who fall through every crack in the system and what happens when nobody is looking for them in the first place. Every year, roughly 600,000 people are reported missing in the United States. That number comes from the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. And while many of those people are eventually found, a disturbing pattern sits underneath the data. Black Americans make up about 13% of the United States population. They account for nearly 40% of all missing persons cases, and when those cases go unsolved, they stay unsolved far longer than cases involving white victims. According to the Black and Missing Foundation, cases involving missing Black people remain open 4 times longer on average than comparable cases involving white or Hispanic individuals. The question is why, and the answer is not one thing. It is a chain of failures that starts with the cameras, runs through the police station, and ends in a county morgue. The late journalist Gwen Ifill gave the first link in that chain a name back in 2004. She called it Missing White Woman Syndrome. The idea is simple and measurable. When a young, white, conventionally attractive woman goes missing in America, the media machine activates. Push alerts, cable news coverage around the clock, volunteer search parties organized within hours, enormous pressure on police departments to produce results. When a Black woman or man disappears under identical circumstances, the silence is staggering. Researchers built a calculator to measure this disparity, and the numbers paint a brutal picture. The disappearance of a 22-year-old white woman in a major city generates an estimated 67 news stories. A 25-year-old Black woman from the same city generates about 8. A 50-year-old Black man gets roughly 6. The calculator even estimates what percentage of Americans would hear about your disappearance based on your race, age, and gender. Over 92% of Americans would hear about a missing young white woman from Nevada. For a middle-aged Black man, the number barely registers. Think about what that means in practice. Fewer stories means fewer tips from the public. Fewer tips means fewer leads for investigators to follow. Fewer leads means the case goes cold. And once a case goes cold, the person is functionally erased from public consciousness. They become a name in a database that nobody checks. In September 2021, the disappearance of Gabby Petito dominated American media for weeks. CNN alone mentioned her case 346 times in a single week. During that same period, hundreds of missing Black people received no national coverage at all. 400 indigenous women and girls had gone missing in Wyoming, the exact same state where Petito disappeared, between 2011 and 2020. Almost none of those cases made the national news. Natalie Wilson, co-founder of the Black and Missing Foundation, got a phone call from the mother of a missing Black girl during the height of the Petito's coverage. The mother asked one question: "Why is my daughter any different?" Nobody had an answer. The media disparity is devastating on its own, but the problem runs deeper than newsrooms and cable networks. It starts at the police station, and what happens there can determine whether a missing person is ever found. When families of missing Black people file reports, they describe a pattern that repeats across cities and decades. Officers label the case non-critical from the start. Detectives classify the missing person as a runaway instead of a potential victim, especially when the person is young, female, or experiencing homelessness. The classification matters enormously because it determines how many resources get assigned to the search. A runaway gets a fraction of the investigative attention that a kidnapping victim receives. And once someone is labeled a runaway, the clock essentially stops. The urgency vanishes. Derica Wilson of the Black and Missing Foundation, a former police officer herself, has talked about a case where a young Black woman was being held in a motel in Falls Church, Virginia, by her abductor. She had been reported missing in a different jurisdiction. Her flyer never even crossed the desk of the local police department handling cases in that area. She was eventually found, covered in bite marks, only because of a chance phone call, not because of coordinated police work, not because of media pressure, because someone happened to call at the right time. Minnesota State Legislator Ruth Richardson put the systemic failures plainly when she pushed for a new state office dedicated to missing Black women and girls. Amber Alerts are less likely to be issued for missing Black girls. Missing Black girls are more likely to be classified as runaways rather than victims of foul play. These are not opinions. They are documented, measurable patterns that repeat across every state in the country. An investigation by Cities Bureau and the Invisible Institute in Chicago uncovered something even worse than slow response times. Reporters found multiple cases where Chicago police had marked missing persons as returned home safely in their official records, even though those people had not returned home at all. In some instances, police actually wrote the words "returned home" without incident in their own reports for people who were still missing. One case involved a 61-year-old woman named Lindseen Franklin who lived on the south side of Chicago. She was reported missing in 2011. In 2014, a Chicago police detective wrote in an official report that Franklin had returned home without incident. She had not. Her case was not actually resolved until 2022, when the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office matched her DNA with a family member. The department had simply closed the case and moved on without ever finding her. The commander, who later reviewed the case, confirmed that it had been prematurely closed. The question that investigators could not answer is how many other cases across Chicago were handled the same way? How many missing people are sitting in closed files, marked as safely returned, while their families are still out there searching for them? Christian Muse went missing from the Washington, D.C. area, and his father, a member of the go-go band Rare Essence, spent months pushing for answers. The police department initially labeled the case non-critical. After 7 months, the father discovered that his son had been removed from the missing persons list entirely. No one informed the family. When he connected with the Black and Missing Foundation, He learned that Christian was not even listed in the National Missing Persons database. His bank account had not been touched in 2 years, and no one had investigated that either. A young black man had simply been erased from the system while his father was still searching. Now, layer homelessness on top of all of this. When a person experiencing homelessness disappears, the barriers to being found multiply dramatically. They often lack consistent contact information. They may not have family members who know where they were staying on any given night. They move between shelters, encampments, doorways, and vehicles depending on the weather, on police sweeps, on which beds are available. Shelter records are incomplete or non-existent. Many shelters do not even track who leaves or when. A person can walk out one morning and never come back, and there is no system in place to register that absence. The people around them, other unhoused individuals, may notice someone is gone, but they often do not have the resources or knowledge to file a missing persons report. Many do not trust the police enough to walk into a station, and even if they did, law enforcement frequently does not take reports about missing homeless people seriously. Officers assume the person moved to another city, checked into a different shelter, or chose to disappear. The default assumption is that homeless people drift, and when drifting is the assumption, vanishing does not trigger alarm bells. For predators, this creates a hunting ground with almost no consequences. Over the last 23 years, there have been more than 2,000 recorded incidents of violence against homeless people in the United States. At least 588 of those attacks were fatal, and those are just the cases that were documented. The actual number is almost certainly higher. The National Coalition for the Homeless has reported a troubling increase in targeted violence against unhoused people in recent years, including attacks involving law enforcement personnel. In November 2023, a man named Jared Joseph Powell drove through the streets of Los Angeles over 4 consecutive nights, targeting homeless men who were sleeping alone on sidewalks and in alleyways. The first victim, 37-year-old Jose Bolanos, was shot at approximately 3 a.m. on November 26th. The next night, 63-year-old Mark Diggs was pushing a shopping cart through the Skid Row neighborhood of downtown Los Angeles when Powell walked up and killed him. A third victim, a 52-year-old man, was shot 2 days later around 2:30 in the morning while sleeping on a couch in an alley. In every case, the pattern was the same. A lone figure exits a vehicle on a dark Los Angeles street, approaches a sleeping or vulnerable person, fires, and drives away into the night. Security cameras captured it all. Police used automatic license plate readers to track the vehicle to Beverly Hills and arrested Powell during a traffic stop. The Los Angeles police chief called him a homicidal serial killer. Los Angeles has more than 75,000 unhoused residents. Roughly 70% of them sleep outside without any form of shelter. Mayor Karen Bass went on television and urged families to contact their unhoused relatives and warn them about the danger. But for the people sleeping on those sidewalks, the danger was not news. It was something they already lived with every single night. Powell was not an isolated case, not even close. In 2022, Gerald Brevoort targeted homeless people sleeping in encampments and on sidewalks in Washington, D.C., then crossed state lines and continued his attacks in New York City. His victims were shot while they slept. In Fort Lauderdale, a 22-year-old man named Nathaniel Petgrave confessed to murdering 3 homeless men and told detectives his original intention was to kill 5. He targeted them, according to police, for no reason other than their availability. They were there, they were alone, and nobody was watching. A 2022 report from San Diego County put hard numbers on what homeless communities already knew. Homeless people face murder rates 19 times higher than the housed population. The rate of attempted murder was 27 times higher. Assault, sexual assault, and elder abuse were all dramatically elevated compared to the general public. In Los Angeles alone, 85 homeless people were murdered in 2021, the highest number ever recorded in the city. These are not random statistics. They describe a population that is being systematically preyed upon. And when the victims are Black and homeless, the chances of their cases being investigated, publicized, or solved shrink to almost nothing. Here is where the system breaks down completely. When a homeless person dies and nobody claims the body, they enter a bureaucratic process that can erase them permanently. As of 2018, over 11,000 sets of unidentified human remains were being held in medical examiner and coroner offices across the United States. These are bodies that have never been matched to a name. Some have been sitting in those offices for years, some for decades. The National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, known as NamUs, was created to help solve these cases by allowing investigators to cross-reference missing persons reports with unidentified remains. The system offers free forensic services, including fingerprint analysis, DNA testing, and dental record comparisons. The problem is that only 17 states require law enforcement agencies to enter information into the system. In every other state, participation is voluntary. That means cases slip through constantly. A missing persons report that was never filed in one city cannot be matched with remains that were never entered into the database in another city, even if the technology to connect them exists. For Black homeless individuals, this gap is catastrophic. If nobody files a missing persons report and the body is never entered into NamUs and no family member comes forward to claim the remains, that person simply ceases to exist in any official record. They can be cremated by the county or buried in an unmarked grave in a potter's field, and no one will ever receive notification. The system was not designed to fail these people specifically. It just was never designed to find them. In 2008, two women decided they had seen enough. Natalie Wilson worked in public relations. Her sister-in-law, Derica Wilson, was a former police officer. Together, they founded the Black and Missing Foundation in Hyattsville, Maryland, after learning about the disappearance of a young woman named Tamika Houston from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Houston's family struggled for months to get any national media attention for her case. That same year, Natalie Holloway disappeared in Aruba and became one of the most heavily covered missing person stories in American history. Everyone knew her face, everyone knew her name. Tamika Houston remained invisible. The Wilson sisters looked at the disparity and asked a question that changed their lives. Why not us? Nearly 2 decades later, the Black and Missing Foundation maintains a database of almost 6,000 active cases involving missing Black people. They produce a podcast called Untold Stories. They partnered with Soledad O'Brien to create a 4-part HBO documentary series called Black and Missing. They worked with the Washington Association of Black Journalists to publish a media guide for reporting on missing persons, giving newsrooms across the country a framework for covering these cases with the urgency they deserve. They hold an annual Hope Without Boundaries walk and run at National Harbor in Maryland to raise awareness. Their advocacy has produced real results. Increased media coverage of the cold case of Pamela Butler, a Washington, D.C. native who disappeared in 2009, contributed to law enforcement dedicating more resources to the investigation. In 2017, Butler's former boyfriend pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. While investigating that case, police linked him to the murder of his former wife back in 1989. One case, given proper attention after years of silence, solved 2 murders spanning nearly 3 decades. But the Wilson sisters will tell you that the work is far from finished. When they started in 2008, roughly 30% of all missing persons were people of color, primarily Black men. Today, that number has climbed to 40%. The true figure is likely even higher because so many cases are never reported at all. Between 2019 and 2021 alone, 5,240 Black women and girls were killed in the United States. The 2,078 homicides recorded in 2021 represented a 54% increase over just 2 years. Black women experience nearly 3 times the homicide rate of white women. This is not a fringe issue. It is not a niche story buried in academic journals. It is an epidemic that has been unfolding in plain sight for decades, while the cameras pointed somewhere else. The cases that get solved are the ones that get seen. The people who get found are the people someone is looking for. And right now, across American cities, there are thousands of Black homeless individuals who have vanished from their communities, from police databases, from the news cycle, and from public memory. They had names, they had families who loved them, they had lives that mattered to someone before the system decided they did not matter enough to find. Every single link in this chain is a choice. Newsrooms choose which faces to put on screen. Police departments choose which cases get resources. Politicians choose which databases get funded. Medical examiners choose how long to hold unidentified remains before disposing of them. And at every single one of those decision points, Black homeless people come last. Relisha Rudd's case changed some things in Washington, D.C. The shelter where she lived was eventually closed. New protocols were put in place. But Derrica Wilson asked a question in the years after Relisha vanished that still does not have a good answer. What other Relishas are out there right now? How many children, how many adults, how many people are slipping through these same cracks today while we assume the system is working? The question is not whether this is happening. The evidence is overwhelming and documented. The question is, what changes now that you know? If you found this important, hit subscribe. I cover stories like this every week, the ones that get buried and the people who fight to bring them back to light. Now, if you want to understand how law enforcement systems fail missing people from the very first phone call, that video is on screen right now.